evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7 o'clock main news. In tonight's headlines, the Council of Ministers meets in an extraordinary session to review the annual report of the panel for follow-up of the governmental apparatus performance. The First Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister chairs an Arab meeting in Geneva ahead of talks with a number of foreign officials and representatives of international organizations. An Israeli airstrike kills 3 senior Hamas commanders as 4 children are killed in another attack. And US jets carry out fresh strikes in Iran despite threats from militants to kill a second American captive after beheading journalist James Foley. His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah sent a cable of condolences to His Holiness Pope Francis I of the Vatican on the passing away of a number of his relatives in a traffic accident in the Republic of Argentina. His Highness the Deputy Emir and Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah sent a cable of condolences to His Holiness Pope Francis I of the Vatican on the passing away of a number of his relatives in a traffic accident in the Republic of Argentina. His Highness Sheikh Jabir al-Mubarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, also sent a similar cable of condolences. The National Assembly Speaker Marzouk Ali al-Ghanem met at his office today with the President of the Audit Bureau Abdul Aziz al-Adsani and Vice President Adil al-Sarawi. The Council of Ministers convened an extraordinary session at Seif Palace today under the chairmanship of His Highness Sheikh Jabir al-Mubarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, in which the annual report of the panel for following up the governmental apparatus performance was reviewed. The Minister of State for Cabinet Affairs and Acting Minister of Justice Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah al-Mubarak al-Sabah said the chairman of the panel for following up the governmental performance, Sheikh Ahmed Mish'al al-Ahmed al-Sabah, conducted a detailed presentation on the performance of the panel during 2013 with emphasis on the implementation of a number of projects which totaled 15 projects. He explained the mechanism which the panel has followed up in coordination with the governmental agencies. He also spoke about the result of the panel study of the Audit Bureau report on the budgets and closing accounts for the fiscal year 2011-2012. The presentation also covered the assignments by the panel by His Highness the Prime Minister and by the Cabinet itself. The annual report summarized the obstacles and defects which impede the implementation of governmental projects that need to be addressed, especially with regards to the major projects that require certain measures so that the panel can follow up their execution in a positive and effective manner. The Council of Ministers also discussed some details related to the projects mentioned in the report and ways to address the flaws that hinder the implementation of the projects. The Minister of State for Cabinet Affairs and Acting Minister of Justice said the Council of Ministers praised the report and commended the efforts exerted for its completion. It also urged all concerned parties to put up the required cooperation in order to push forward the wheel of development in the country. The First Deputy Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs, representative of the current presidency of the Arab Summit, Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, presided today in Geneva over an Arab coordination meeting before holding a number of sessions with foreign officials and representatives of international organizations in Switzerland. The meeting, which was attended by the Arab League Secretary General Dr. Nabil Al-Arabi and Palestine Foreign Minister Dr. Riyad Al-Maliki, focused on the expected meetings with the chairman of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Mauro, in Geneva, and the Swiss Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Yves Rossier, in the Swiss capital, Bern. Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid explained in the meeting the possibility of holding an international conference to discuss conditions of the Palestinians under occupation according to the 4th Geneva Agreement, which covers conditions of civilians under foreign occupation and the means to oblige Israel to abide by this international agreement, especially in light of its current aggression on Gaza. 3 senior Hamas commanders and 4 children were among at least 15 Palestinians killed in Gaza today as Israel stepped up airstrikes on day 45 of the bloody conflict. This comes amid failed attempts to reach a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel. More with Majd Al-Wahidi from Gaza.
All efforts to mediate a lasting truce between Israelis and Palestinians have been shattered after both sides blamed the other for violating the temporary ceasefire. In Gaza, Hamas spokesman accused Israel of stalling the negotiations.
The Israeli occupation miscreated the talks in Cairo because it doesn't have the will to reach an agreement, and this is why the negotiations have failed.
The negotiations were brokered by Egypt to put a decisive end to the war. Due to stark differences on several issues, both sides have pulled back and the scenes of bloodshed have returned to Gaza.
We were sitting in our house and suddenly they hit it with a rocket. There was no warning, and even when the ambulance came to rescue us, they bombarded the place again and the children started to cry. It looks like a massacre. I have no words.
Israeli forces targeted tens of homes of Al-Qassam leadership as well. As usual, women and children were the innocent victims of Israel's power.
This is the 45th day of Israel's longest and deadliest war in Gaza. People here say that surviving the attacks will be nothing less than a miracle.
In the middle of a relentless fighting, some observers still believe that both Israel and Hamas will reach a settlement soon.
At the end of the day, Israel and the resistant faction will sign a deal. What is happening now is just a round of talks, but under fire. I think we will witness a political solution in the coming few days.
President Mahmoud Abbas made his way to Qatar in order to meet the Emir and Hamas exiled leader to discuss the latest developments and more aid to Palestinians. However, the current situation is full of ambiguity. Most people believe that the aftermath of the war, as well as the future obstacles, will be harder to resolve. Maslow Haidi, Kuwait TV, Gaza.
U.S. aircraft launched fresh strikes against militants in northern Iraq despite threats from the group to kill a second American captive in retribution for continued attacks. U.S. Navy fighters and drones provided air cover to Kurdish and Iraqi forces battling militants near the city of Mosul. On Tuesday, the group released a video showing the beheading of journalist James Foley, who went missing in 2012. The militants also threatened to kill another U.S. reporter they're holding. But since the video was released, American forces have conducted 14 new strikes near the Mosul Dam, a key facility recaptured from militants earlier this week. U.S. officials said they had successfully eliminated vehicles and other targets belonging to the militants. The ruling Justice and Development Party, or the AKP, is due to pick a successor to take over from Recep Tayyip Erdogan as Turkey's Prime Minister. The candidate will be chosen at a party meeting today, chaired for the last time by Erdogan, who won the August 10th presidential elections and will have to vacate the office. Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu is reported to be the strongest candidate. The nominee will be confirmed as chairman at a party congress next week. Erdogan will take office on August 28th, and he has made clear that he intends to transform the normally ceremonial presidency by employing its seldom used powers, such as summoning and presiding over cabinet meetings. Thousands of anti-government protesters continued their sit-in outside the Pakistan Parliament in Islamabad today. Twin protests by thousands of supporters of opposition politician Imran Khan and cleric Tahirul Qadri have virtually shut down the city and raised fears of unrest. To resolve the issue, Pakistan officials held initial talks before dawn today with representatives from the two opposition groups. A senior leader of Khan's party said the opposition presented 6 demands to the government, including one for Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's resignation. However, inside the National Assembly, lawmakers unanimously adopted a resolution today rejecting what they described unconstitutional demands by the opposition. The day's talks came after Pakistan's powerful Army Chief General Rashid Sharif requested that Sharif's government negotiate with the protesters. Thailand's junta-appointed legislator today nominated the country's military ruler to be the next prime minister. The assembly voted unanimously to name General Prayut Chan-o-cha to the post during a session in Bangkok. Prayut was the only candidate put forward. 60-year-old Prayut is due to retire from the army next month, and the change appears aimed in part at keeping him at the helm as the military implements sweeping political reforms. Prayut has effectively served as de facto premier since staging a May 22nd coup, which toppled an elected government. Police in Indonesia used tear gas today to disperse protesters trying to get close to a court set to rule on a challenge to the legality of last month's elections. The protesters were supporters of Prabowo Subianto, who lost the polls. Subianto has alleged massive fraud in the July 9th polls and filed a complaint at the Constitutional Court, which was due to rule on it later today. Witnesses said police fired the tear gas when protesters tried to get past barbed wire, blocking a road leading to the court. There were no immediate reports of injuries among around 300 protesters. 5 Ukrainian troops were killed and 21 injured during fighting with pro-Russian separatists in the past 24 hours in rebel-held areas of eastern Ukraine. Andrei Lysenko, a spokesman for the Ukrainian National Security Council, told reporters in Kiev that government troops were still fighting separatists in and around Ilovaisk, a town near the rebel-held city of Donetsk, even though he said Ilovaisk was under government control. Ukrainian troops have made significant advances into rebel-held territory this week in a conflict that has already claimed more than 2,000 lives and forced over 340,000 people to flee their homes. Lysenko said the Ukrainian military had captured 2 military vehicles near Luhansk that were registered to a paratrooper unit from the northern Russian city of Pskov. Meanwhile, at least 2 civilians were killed and an unspecified number wounded today in an artillery strike on a suburb of Donetsk. The West Point in Liberia's capital Conakry returned to calm today after shots were fired as riot police and soldiers used scrap wood and barbed wire to seal off 50,000 people inside the area in a government attempt to contain the spread of Ebola. Hundreds of residents took to the streets on Wednesday, furious at being isolated by the government that has failed to quickly collect dead bodies from the streets. The densely populated squatter area occupies a kilometre-long peninsula in Liberia's seaside capital. 4 people are said to have been injured in the clashes. Liberia has seen the most deaths, 576, in the world's worst Ebola outbreak, which has hit West Africa this year. A total of 1,350 have died in 4 countries, Guinea, Nigeria and Sierra Leone, as well as Liberia. Police in the U.S. city of Ferguson, which has been racked by a week of unrest since the shooting of an 18-year-old black man on Wednesday night, said Wednesday night was quieter. Missouri State Highway Patrol Captain Ron Johnson, who is in charge of security, said there were fewer incidents and no confrontations as fewer protesters returned to the streets on Wednesday night. Earlier on Wednesday, Attorney General Eric Holder sought to reassure the people of Ferguson about the investigation into Brown's death on August 9th. Holder met with federal officials in Ferguson investigating the shooting and met with Brown's relatives.
Now, our investigation is different from that which the state is doing. We are looking for violations of federal criminal civil rights statutes, which is different from what the local investigation is. But we have brought a substantial number of people here, number of agents here, who've done a great job in the canvassing that they did over the past weekend. They can
Rescue and relief efforts continue in Hiroshima today after a series of landslides killed at least 39 people and left several missing. Around 2,500 personnel from the Japanese police and the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force were deployed to search for the missing people. Residents who had lost their homes gathered in an evacuation center. Keiji Furuya, Japanese minister responsible for disaster management, visited the area and expressed his regret at Hiroshima city's handling of the situation. Local authorities in Hiroshima have faced criticism for being too slow to issue an evacuation warning over the heavy rains that were believed to have triggered the landslides. And in financial news, the last day of this week's trading at the Kuwait Stock Exchange closed with positive numbers. The KSX 15 closed at a gain of 0.5 points, reaching 1,212.99 points. The weighted index ended up on a gain of 0.67 points, closing at 494.44 points. And the price index reached 7,350.34 points, up by 10.78 points. The session saw 5,093 trades worth 25.2 million Kuwaiti dinars, with 244.04 million stocks changing hands. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. And to recap tonight's news, here are the headlines once again. The Council of Ministers meet in an extraordinary session to review the annual report of the panel for follow-up of the governmental apparatus performance. The First Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister chairs an Arab meeting in Geneva ahead of talks with a number of foreign officials and representatives of international organizations. An Israeli airstrike kills 3 senior Hamas commanders as 4 children are killed in another attack. And US jets carry out fresh strikes in Iraq despite threats from militants to kill a second American captive after beheading journalist James Foley. Thank you for joining us.